I never thought much about the job when I first started. Deliveries were just a way to pay rent, a rhythm of doorbells, signatures, and quick exchanges that blurred together into weeks and months. I kept my head down, tried not to linger, and told myself the work was temporary, a bridge towards something bigger. Most customers barely looked at me, eager only to grab their package and retreat back into their private worlds. But there was one exception, one man who changed the pattern of everything. Dawson. The first time I saw him, I nearly dropped the box in my hands. He opened the door wearing nothing but a towel slung low around his waist, water still dripping from his dark hair. He leaned against the frame like he had all the time in the world, smiling as though he'd been expecting me. It was bold, maybe careless, and definitely unlike any delivery I'd done before. I mumbled a polite greeting, handed him the package, and tried not to stare, though I could feel his eyes on me as I walked back down the hall. I told myself it was coincidence. People answer the door in robes, pajamas, half-dressed. It wasn't unusual. But the next week, when another box for Dawson appeared on my route, I knew better. Again, he was in just a towel, standing there as if he had rehearsed it. His grin was the same, that slight upward curve of his mouth that hinted at mischief. This time, he asked how my day was going, his voice calm and smooth, carrying a kind of ease that unsettled me. I stumbled through an answer, clutching my delivery scanner like a shield. The third delivery. It felt intentional. He always timed it perfectly, as though he knew when I'd arrive. His towel was always the same, white, wrapped carelessly around him, threatening to slip with the slightest wrong movement. He didn't just take the package, he lingered. He asked my name, repeated it back to me like he wanted to savor it. "Colton," he said slowly, locking eyes with me, as if testing how I'd react to hearing my name in his voice. I left with my pulse quickened, replaying the moment in my head all afternoon that I knew I should have brushed it off. People flirt, people tease, but boundaries mattered, and I had no business feeling drawn to a customer. Still, Dawson made it hard to ignore. There was a confidence about him, a kind of magnetism that made his presence feel larger than the small hallway we always stood in. He never crossed a line, not outright, but the way he looked at me carried an invitation, subtle yet undeniable. Why friends at work noticed a change in me. They joked about me, smiling more, teased that someone must have caught my attention. I denied it, kept Dawson tucked away like a secret I wasn't ready to share. There was something private about it, something fragile. I couldn't explain why a man I barely knew lingered in my mind, why his image followed me into quiet nights when I tried to focus on anything else. Weeks passed, deliveries stacked up, and the routine solidified. Each time, Dawson appeared the same way, towel, smirk, an almost theatrical sense of timing. And each time, I told myself not to read into it, not to let curiosity get the better of me. Yet it was curiosity that kept gnawing at me, whispering that maybe there was something more, something waiting just beyond the threshold of that door point one evening, the air heavy with the last traces of summer heat. I brought another package to Dawson's building. The hallway lights flickered overhead as I climbed the stairs, the box tucked under my arm. When I knocked, I already knew what to expect, but the anticipation felt sharper than usual. The door swung open, and there he was again, towel in place, droplets of water trailing down his chest as though he'd just stepped out of the shower. "Right on time," he said with a grin, taking the package from me, but not stepping back inside. His eyes held mine, steady, deliberate, and I felt the space between us tighten. That I shifted awkwardly, waiting for the usual brief exchange to end, but he didn't move. Instead, he leaned slightly against the frame and said, almost casually, "You don't always have to leave right away. You could come in for a minute." The words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. My first instinct was to laugh it off, to chalk it up to his usual playfulness. But there was no smirk this time, no teasing tone. His voice was calm, almost serious, and his gaze didn't waver. That I stood there, torn. Part of me wanted to turn and walk away, to protect myself from whatever this could lead to. Another part, the louder part, wanted to step inside, to see what lay beyond that door and why he'd been pulling me closer with each encounter. The hallway felt suddenly silent, the air thick with tension. I realized I was holding my breath. My hand tightened around the empty delivery bag at my side, a weak anchor against the pull I felt. Dawson tilted his head, waiting, the faintest trace of a smile returning to his lips. "Just a drink," he added softly, like an assurance. And that's where I froze, at the edge of something I couldn't name, my heart racing with the question of whether to stay outside in the safety of the familiar or cross the threshold into the unknown. The door was open, the invitation clear, and I knew that whatever choice I made would change everything. For a few days, I told myself the message from Dr. Hale didn't mean anything. It was just a kind gesture, a professional courtesy, maybe. But that explanation didn't hold up when I caught myself checking my phone more often than usual, half expecting another message. There was something about his words, the way he'd written them, not distant, not clinical, but warm, human. Like someone who didn't just diagnose symptoms, but actually cared what they meant. By the end of the week, I convinced myself it was harmless to reply. I sent a short message. "Thanks again for checking in the other night. I'm feeling better." His response came within minutes. "I'm glad. You seemed like you were carrying too much on your shoulders." That one sentence lingered in my mind longer than I wanted it to. He saw things people usually missed. I told myself it was because he was trained to notice that empathy was just another tool in his profession, but it didn't feel that way. His attention didn't feel rehearsed. It felt real. That a few days later, I went back to the clinic for follow-up results. The waiting room was quieter this time, sunlight pooling across the floor. When Rowan, by then I'd started thinking of him by his first name, walked in, I caught myself sitting up straighter. His eyes met mine, and for a split second, something unspoken passed between us. Recognition. Warmth. That he greeted me with the same calm tone as before, but his smile felt different, less formal, more personal. "How have you been holding up?" he asked as we sat down. "Better," I said. "Still tired, but less heavy, I guess." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's good to hear. Sometimes progress isn't measured in energy, it's measured in how quiet the noise gets." That line stayed with me. He always spoke like that, softly, as if his words were meant to heal in ways medicine couldn't. As he reviewed my chart, his voice dipped into that same careful rhythm. The results were fine, nothing alarming, but he noticed the tension in my shoulders, the dark circles under my eyes. "You need a rest," he said, closing the file. "Not just sleep, real rest. The kind that comes when you let yourself stop pretending everything's fine." Something about his tone disarmed me. I wasn't used to people seeing through me like that. Usually, I was good at appearing composed, but under his gaze, it felt impossible. Before I left, he handed me a small card. "This has my direct number," he said. "If you ever need to talk about stress or anything else, I'm a good listener." It was an unusual offer, and I hesitated before taking it. Still, I slipped it into my pocket. "Thank you," I said quietly. That night, I stared at the card longer than I wanted to admit. I told myself I wouldn't use it. But a few days later, after another sleepless night, I texted him. "Can't sleep again. Any suggestions?" His reply came minutes later. Deep breaths, maybe a walk. But if it's more than just insomnia, talk to me. Sometimes silence is the real cause." We started messaging every few days after that. Nothing inappropriate. Small check-ins, gentle conversations about life and burnout. Yet beneath the surface, something was shifting. His words began to carry weight. His concern felt personal. One evening, he sent, "If you ever feel like talking face-to-face, I'm around. Coffee's on me." I hesitated, then agreed. The next day, we met at a small cafe near the river. He was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with a cup in hand. He looked different outside the clinic, softer, less guarded. The white coat had been replaced by a simple gray sweater and jeans. He smiled when he saw me, and for the first time in months, I felt something flicker inside me, something that wasn't emptiness. Our conversation started lightly, whether work, the city, but gradually it deepened. He asked about my life, my move, what had driven me to start over. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone, about the relationship that ended, the accident, the nights when loneliness became unbearable. He listened without interruption, eyes steady, expression open. When I apologized for oversharing, he shook his head. "Don't," he said softly. "People don't open up unless they need to. I'm glad you did." There was something about his presence that made it easy to trust him. It wasn't just the way he listened, it was how he existed in silence, making it feel like a kind of safety. As the sun began to set, the cafe grew quieter. I watched the light fade across his face, and for the first time, noticed how tired his eyes looked despite the calm he carried. "You spend so much time fixing others," I said. "Who helps you when you're the one who's hurting?" He gave a faint smile. "I read. I walk. Sometimes I talk to strangers who understand more than they realize." I didn't know how to respond to that. Maybe I didn't need to. Some connections didn't need definition. They just existed quietly, naturally. When we stood to leave, he placed his hand lightly on my arm. It wasn't a romantic touch. It was gentler, grounding, as if to say, "I see you." His eyes met mine, calm but searching. "You make people forget their pain just by being near them," he said. That I didn't know how to react. Compliments always felt foreign to me, especially ones spoken with that kind of sincerity. I smiled awkwardly and said, "That's ironic, coming from a doctor." He chuckled. "Maybe, but sometimes healing isn't about medicine. It's about moments like this." We parted ways outside the cafe. I watched him walk away, wondering why it suddenly felt harder to breathe. That night, I lay awake replaying every word, every glance. There had been no crossing of boundaries, no confessions, but something invisible had begun to form between us. I wanted to tell myself it was just gratitude. He'd been kind when I needed kindness, and I was confusing that with something else. But the truth was harder to admit. I looked forward to his messages. I caught myself smiling when his name appeared on my screen. I trusted him in a way that felt dangerous. Too soon, too deeply. Still, I didn't stop. When he texted me later that night, "You seemed lighter today. Keep that." I felt my chest tighten in a way that wasn't pain, but wasn't peace either. That I replied, "Only because you helped me breathe again." He sent a single word back. "Good." It was simple. But behind that word, I could feel something unspoken, something real. Yes, I turned off my phone. I realized that what had started as care was becoming something else entirely, something I wasn't ready to name. And though I didn't know it yet, that feeling, the one I was trying so hard to ignore, would soon become the very thing that unraveled us both. The next few weeks blurred into a rhythm of messages, coffee meetups, and quiet moments that felt both healing and fragile. Rowan had become a constant presence in my life, someone who checked in without reason, who noticed when my voice sounded tired over the phone, who reminded me to eat when I forgot. What started as care had turned into something more intimate, though neither of us said it aloud. There was an unspoken rule between us. We didn't name what we were because naming it would make it real. One Thursday afternoon, he texted me to come in for a follow-up. "Nothing urgent," he'd written. "Just something I'd like to go over in person." I told myself it was routine, but part of me was nervous. Maybe it wasn't my health I was worried about. Maybe it was how different things would feel now that I couldn't pretend he was just my doctor. When I arrived, the clinic was nearly empty. The receptionist greeted me, but even her usual smile felt distant, like the air itself was holding its breath. Rowan appeared a few minutes later. He wasn't wearing his usual calm expression. His jaw was tight, eyes shadowed with something I couldn't place. "Thanks for coming in," he said, motioning for me to follow him to his office instead of the exam room. The door clicked shut behind me. The sound felt final. He sat across from me, a file open on his desk. For a long moment, he didn't speak. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above us, the faint tapping of his fingers on the edge of the paper. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He exhaled slowly. "Your results are fine, physically. There's nothing to worry about medically." But he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "There's something I need to tell you." The way he said it made my chest tighten. "All right," I said cautiously. "What is it?" He turned the folder toward himself again, as if hiding behind it. "When I was reviewing your records, I noticed something familiar. I wanted to double check before mentioning it, but it's been bothering me. My pulse picked up. Familiar how? He didn't look up. A few years ago, I had a patient with the same last name as yours, Porter. I didn't think much of it until I saw your emergency contact listed in the old system. Darren Porter. The name hit me like a drop of cold water down my spine. I hadn't heard it spoken in months. You knew him? I asked, voice low that Rowan's eyes finally met mine. There was something raw there, guilt maybe. I did. More than that, we dated. Briefly. Years ago, before I ever met you. For a moment, everything went quiet. The walls, the floor, the sound of the clock on the wall, it all blurred into nothing. I just stared at him, unable to find the words. You dated my ex, I said finally, each word landing heavy in the air between us. He nodded slowly. I didn't realize it first, not until I saw his name on your file. And when I did, I didn't know how to tell you. My thoughts scattered in every direction, fragments of memories, pieces of that old relationship that had already left scars. The accident, the arguments, the betrayal that had made me leave the city in the first place. You knew, I said, my voice barely holding steady. All this time you knew. No, he said quickly, leaning forward. I swear, Miles, I didn't. Not until recently. And when I realized, I thought telling you might make things worse. I laughed, but it came out hollow. Worse than this. His expression faltered. I didn't want to lose the connection we had. You have to understand, it was never about him. It was about you. It's always been about you. The room felt too small, too bright. Every memory between us suddenly rewrote itself. Every touch, every word, every glance now tangled with this revelation. Had I been some kind of replacement? A reminder? The thought made my stomach turn. I stood up, unable to sit any longer. I trusted you, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You of all people. And now I don't even know if what we had was real. Miles, he started, but I cut him off. Don't, I said. Please don't. There was so much I wanted to ask, but I couldn't. The air between us had shifted, poisoned by a truth that couldn't be undone. He reached out slightly, like he wanted to touch my arm, but stopped himself halfway. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly. I didn't plan any of this. I just found you, and you felt like peace after years of noise. His words were tender, sincere even, but they only made it worse. I felt the ground of what we'd built cracking beneath me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I walked out without another word. The hallway felt longer than it had before, every step echoing like the end of something sacred. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, and I realized I hadn't even brought my jacket. My hands trembled as I unlocked my car, my mind replaying every moment we'd shared. Every message, every coffee, every look. By the time I got home, I couldn't tell if I was angry or just broken. I sat on the couch in the dark, scrolling through our messages, reading them through this new lens. Every word now carried a question mark. Was he thinking of me? Or of who I reminded him of? The ache that returned wasn't new. It was the same one I'd felt months ago when I left Aaron, the same one I thought Rowan had helped me heal. Maybe he hadn't healed me at all. Maybe he just reopened the wound under a different name. That why phone buzzed around midnight. His name lit up the screen, Rowan Hale. I didn't answer. Another message came through seconds later. Please, Miles, let me explain. You deserve to know what really happened. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. I wanted to delete it. I wanted to forget everything. But beneath the anger, there was still something else, something stubborn and unwilling to let go. That I didn't respond. Not that night. I turned off the phone, but his words stayed in my head long after the screen went dark. You deserve to know what really happened. And though I didn't want to admit it, part of me still wanted to hear him say it. The weeks after that fateful visit to Dr. Monroe's clinic felt like I was learning to breathe all over again. Every sound seemed sharper, every face more fragile, as if I'd been handed new eyes to see the world. And yet, amid the chaos of medical reports, emotional turbulence, and unanswered questions, my heart clung stubbornly to the only thing that had kept me steady. Him. Doctor. Monroe had become something more than a physician. He was a constant presence. He called every morning to check on me, his tone professional yet filled with warmth. Sometimes we drift into conversations that had nothing to do with medicine, music, old memories, the weight of loneliness. I tell him about the piano pieces I used to play as a kid, and he'd admit he hadn't touched his guitar in years. It was strange, this bond between a doctor and his patient, but neither of us seemed willing to break it. I started visiting the clinic for follow-ups more frequently than I needed to. Maybe part of me wanted reassurance that I was healing, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. There was a kind of quiet electricity in those moments when his hand brushed mine while taking my pulse, or when our eyes met across the sterile room. Point one evening, after a particularly long day at work, I received a text from him. "Are you up for some air? There's a small cafe across from the river. I could use the company." I read it twice, my pulse quickening. My doctor invited me out. It wasn't a date, not exactly. But the idea of seeing him outside those white walls made something flutter inside me. I said yes. The cafe was dimly lit, with low music humming through the air. He was already there, in a dark sweater and rolled sleeves, looking far less like the man who'd once examined me with clinical precision. He smiled when he saw me, and in that smile, there was something unspoken, tenderness mixed with hesitation, that we talked for hours. About the diagnosis, about fear, about the way life changes when you realize how fragile it is. I told him how the discovery had made me reevaluate everything. The people I let in, the walls I built. And then he said something I'll never forget. Sometimes, he said softly, we find love in the moments we're meant to break. There was the word, love. He hadn't said it to me, but it lingered between us, pulsing like a heartbeat neither of us could ignore. As the night deepened, we walked along the river. The air was crisp, the city lights trembling on the water. I remember glancing at him and realizing that my feelings had crossed an invisible line long ago. This wasn't about gratitude or confusion anymore. It was something pure, something undeniable. But love, as I've learned, rarely comes without consequences. A few days later, I got a call from the clinic, not from him, but from the administration. Someone had filed a complaint suggesting unprofessional conduct between doctor and patient. I was stunned. He never mentioned it, never let on that there were whispers circling around us. When I confronted him, he looked tired, like the weight of the world was pressing on his shoulders. "I'll handle it," he said. "You don't have to get involved." But his voice trembled, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for me. Over the following weeks, the investigation hung like a storm cloud over everything. He was suspended temporarily, pending review. My guilt ate at me. I wanted to protect him, to tell them the truth, that what happened between us wasn't exploitation or confusion, but connection. Yet the world doesn't understand the kind of bond we shared. To them, it was wrong that we met one last time before the final hearing. It was raining, soft and cold. He stood by his car, his hair damp, eyes red-rimmed. "I don't regret it," he said quietly. "Not a single thing." Neither did I. He reached out, and I took his hand, just for a moment. The rain pooled between our fingers like the truth we couldn't hide anymore. Then he turned away, and I watched as he disappeared into the gray. Months passed. My health improved, though my heart still carried the weight of everything that happened. I heard he left the city, took a position at a rural clinic where no one knew his name. Sometimes, I catch myself scrolling through my contacts, pausing at his name. I never call, but on nights when the world feels quiet enough, I whisper a silent thank you for the care, the courage, and the love that bloomed in a place it wasn't supposed to. Because what he discovered that day in the checkup room wasn't just a diagnosis. It was the beginning of something fragile and real, something that changed us both forever. And though I'll never see him again, I know this much to be true. He didn't just heal my body. He healed something deeper, something I didn't know was broken. Maybe that's what love really is. Not the kind that lasts forever, but the kind that finds you when you need it most and leaves you better than it found you.